been hearing from people who are listening online from time to time, from News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And the website has a function. It says listen live. You click on that. So you could be hundreds or thousands of miles away. I was telling Dan Tom a few minutes ago, I have a vacation goal this summer. I've been trying to get some input from people. I have not been on a real long vacation in a number of years. I like to take a lot of the shorter 4-day weekends, and then I go away and stay somewhere throughout the region. Maybe it was Jackson Hole for a 4-day weekend last year. And I visit these different spots, and it's fun to get away on these little brief respites. But this summer, I'd like to actually go away for a week somewhere, stay in a hotel, and I had a couple of thoughts in mind. I was thinking either Anchorage for a week in July. They have a great fireworks display from what I've read, or go to Victoria in early July as well. So you'd be there for Dominion Day, and you could catch the fireworks. Both places have a lot of selling points on that. Uh, if I go away, though, I'll be able to keep track of what's taking place here in Twin Falls by going to the website. In fact, I could be sitting at a diner somewhere in another part of the world and listening while I'm on vacation. I do want to mention a couple of other quick things. I brought this up earlier. We did a show last Friday that was live in Jerome at the McDonald's in Jerome, which has a brand new playground, indoor playground for kids. It made me want to be 8 years old again. I don't have any desire to do it when I'm 55, but when I was 8, I would have really liked that. The grand opening is taking place this coming weekend. So if the weather is still like this tomorrow, I had to pause there for a minute because I was going to say something about the weather that wouldn't be allowed on radio. But if the weather is still like this tomorrow and you're heading into the weekend, it's a great place, even today, to take the kids. When I was a younger guy, I loved Saturdays. We had a routine. And I find that when you have kids, sometimes a routine's a good thing. I would take my daughter and sometimes my daughter and niece to the movies on a Saturday afternoon. And then we might stop and do a little shopping. And then we always concluded with a trip to McDonald's because the girls would go burn off all of that excess energy playing in the gym, the indoor playground. And then when they'd get home, they'd sleep really well. That's a good thing. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. A couple of other things I wanted to review during this segment of the program. Remember this name, John Podesta? This was the guy who was working on Hillary Clinton's campaign. We have all of this Russia, Russia, Russia talk coming out of Democrats and liberals in this country who claim that Donald Trump unfairly is the president of the United States. John Podesta had his emails hacked because while he was working on the campaign and through the DNC, Democrat National Committee, his password was password. Now, that's something you learn. When I first started using computers and the internet at work in the 1990s, we were told you better come up with something a little bit better than that. I had a coworker, David Muir of all people, works at ABC News now. And David had gone to school at Ithaca College, and being a wise guy, I sat right next to him. Being a wise guy, one time I literally typed in Ithaca with his name into the computer at my desk, and lo and behold, David's email came up. So I sent an email to all the staff, as if David had lost his mind. I didn't get in trouble. I shouldn't have done it. I know that, although he had a good sense of humor about it, and he laughed about it afterward. But the point of the matter is you got to have a password that's a little more complex is what they used to teach us. And anybody who claims to be smart and is using password as a password is a few bricks shy of a load. John Podesta has a guest column today at the Washington Post. He's joining Michael Moore in claiming that Donald Trump is going to bring about the end of the planet because of Trump's new policies when it comes to the environment, and especially with energy development. This is what Mr. Password Podesta has to say. Last week's report by the World Meteorological Organization noted that the world is experiencing record warming. Well, maybe not today. And maybe not, well, it is right now at 46. It is about 60 degrees warmer than it was the coldest morning I drove to work this past winter. I remember I got up one day and it was 14 degrees below zero when I drove to work. Yes, indeed, the world is getting warmer. The World Meteorological Organization, he writes, noted that the world is experiencing record warming with the past 3 years being the hottest recorded, rising carbon dioxide levels, an alarming drop in Arctic and Antarctic sea ice, and severe droughts in southern and eastern Africa and Central America. Now, the drought broke in this part of the country and was worse in California. And right now they're dealing with, well, a lot more snow and water than they wanted. Seems to me that that'll be the next big fear of the media. They'll be running around saying, "Oh, the flood waters are up to the stop signs." And it's all Donald Trump's fault. 8:50, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 46 right now. And then Lefty always tries to say, well, the consensus is, and then they try to tell you it's settled science. No science is ever settled. Never, ever, ever, never. And scientists will tell you that. But Lefty doesn't want you to know that because Lefty wants, well, the sky is falling. Henny Penny running around because she got clobbered on the head with an acorn is running around the barnyard screaming the sky is falling. And then the writer says, as the report warned, the planet is now in truly uncharted territory. It'll get really warm if that fat guy over in North Korea decides to launch a few missiles our direction. It'll be a lot warmer. In fact, he'll have global warming in Pyongyang of about 3,500 degrees on a particular day. The idea that this is somehow settled, and yes, it gets warmer in this world. We've brought this up numerous times on the air. The world has been warming since the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago. And eventually the world will go back into an ice age, or, according to a writer who had a story many, many years ago, a scientist at Harper's. I used to subscribe to Harper's. The guy made the claim, and I think it's legitimate. He said, we may have actually postponed the onset of another ice age because man, about, 10,000 years ago, terraformed the earth, started farming, domesticated animals, and started growing crops. And that may have actually warmed the earth enough to avoid that next ice age cycle. Here's the question. Would you rather live in a warmer earth, or would you rather live in an earth that's covered, half of it at least, by glaciers? Which one do you think would be worse for humanity? Password. We have a caller with us, 736-0300, 736-0300. You're listening to Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're on the air.
I've heard this over and over again that it was the last year was the warmest one on record. When you start researching it, what they're using for sources is very sketchy. These people are, I'm just so sick of them lying, but it's, I guess, what do we say? But you see, you hear it repeated over and over again because it's coming out of our major media sources. And God, aren't they so solid with their sourcing? It's a joke. And then there's articles about the fact that the planet may be going colder. And you see, like, for instance, the Northwest during the course of this winter was covered with snow completely. I mean, you got on a snowmobile in Oregon and rode it to Alaska without much trouble as long as you were on a road. The entire state of Idaho was covered. The entire state was covered with snow. I mean, these people are so full of you-know-what that. But you see, when people hear it, this is the warmest year on record, the last 3 years in a row or whatever, people just go, oh, well, it must be true.
Well, how about all of these? Bill? Well, thank you for the call. How about all of these airports where they'll take the temperature there and call that the official temperature, and the airport is covered with the tarmac, which attracts heat. Well, what if you took the temperature officially a couple of miles away? Would you get a different reading in an open field versus, on black tar? Yeah, of course. I was telling Don Chandler the other day a story about a buddy of mine, Ray Charles, no relation to the singer. Ray and I went to high school together. And Ray was never in any serious trouble. He was a really good kid around the neighborhood, and he was a good student too, but he didn't necessarily always like going to school. So he would sometimes try to feign that he was sick in the morning, so he'd quickly rub a hand back and forth across his forehead to get some friction going, and then tell his mother he didn't feel well. She'd touch his forehead and say, well, you do feel a little hot. So she'd go and she'd get the thermometer, and she'd come back and she'd pop that into Ray's mouth. Ray got away with this for years until one day she walked in and caught Ray. He'd taken the thermometer out of his mouth, and he was holding the business end of it up against a light bulb, which, of course, made the temperature go sky high. And he would do this until he normally heard her footsteps, then pop it back into his mouth for, a few seconds. She'd but it wouldn't drop that far. She'd take the thermometer and say, "Oh my goodness." And Ray wouldn't have to go to school, but after she caught him doctoring the thermometer, well, he ended up having to go to school from then on. And a lot of times when he legitimately probably wasn't well afterwards, she didn't trust him any longer. This is what we're dealing with all of this climate hoo-ha. These scientists, settled science. Again, there are about 35,000 scientists around the world who say, no, it isn't. There's also a piece today, happened to read this, related to this, and this comes from a publication called, well, it's actually the Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol's publication. And it's about a guy named Jay Faison. Jay Faison is a conservative, and he does believe that the world is getting warmer. He says, however, all of these people on the left who are so dogmatic about it, they're so heavy-handed in their approach, they just tick people off. And he said if they would just take another approach, he's also on the same page as the Danish scientist Bjorn Lomborg. Who is Bjorn Lomborg? He's a very bright guy. The first time I ever read any of his work was about 10 years ago, and he was writing a column in the Washington Post. I was about an hour early for church one day, so I sat and I read his column in the car before I went inside. And he explained, yeah, okay, the world may be getting hotter, but do we go around and starve half the planet and spend our entire treasuries on these harebrained ideas claiming we're going to save everybody? Or are there cheaper fixes? You know, do you build a higher break wall here and there? Yeah, why don't we do that instead of going around and taking all of the money out of your pockets and turning around and giving it to all of the friends of politicians who are building these giant pinwheels out across the land, which aren't going to solve the problem. And he even points out, he said, there's simply no way that these alternative energies are going to be able to fuel this planet, give the planet the energy it needs to succeed. You know what you call a country that doesn't use its God-given energy resources? You call it third world. That's what they're trying to do to us. I'll take a couple of degrees of warming. I certainly will. If that means that my children and grandchildren won't have to starve so they can satisfy Lefty that we've turned the clock back on global warming. We're coming up on 8:57. One more hour of this program ahead. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I wanted to mention, and I thought I mentioned it earlier in the program, the state legislature has wrapped up as of yesterday for the year. Well, they can always come back for a special session. That's unlikely. They may have to do it, though, if they can't come to – the governor decides to veto the Garvey bonds on road repairs. They might have to come back and come up with some other fix because the roads aren't going to be getting better on their own anytime soon. I do want to mention, if we get a chance, we'll talk about some of that in the next hour of the show. In the meantime, I also wanted to point out, if you're listening this morning, God bless you and thank you. But if you're having a difficult time hearing our program, please call my friend, Dr. Christine Pickup. She's in Mount Harrison Audiology. She's a doctor of audiology that's located in Rupert. Why would you choose Mount Harrison Audiology? Independence. Mount Harrison Audiology is the only independent, locally owned hearing healthcare practice in southern Idaho. That means more choices for treatment than just one brand and lower costs. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology today for your appointment. 208-312-0957. That's Mount Harrison Audiology, 312-0957. One more hour ahead, but first, Fox News at 9 o'clock on KLIX.